Back to another video. I just wanted to talk about maybe a short video, not really music related, but it's related towards creating music. So if that's what you're looking for, sorry, this is going to be a nerd video for the nerds. Any nerds in here? JK, you're on YouTube. You're a nerd. Even if you think you're cool, you're always a fucking nerd. Looking on YouTube is pretty nerdy. Anyway, so I left Windows about a year ago, 99% of the way. The only thing I would do on Windows was create music through Ableton, and that I had a separate hard drive just with Ableton on it, all my VSTs and such, and all my plugins and whatever to make music or whatever. And I was getting kind of tired of restarting my machine to go to work, to do work stuff, and then to do because that machine didn't have internet on it. I had disabled the Ethernet on it because the Windows updates were so abysmal. It just kept cucking me over and over again. Every time there'd be an update, Windows would reset everything. I had to reinstall Windows again, and then that would fix it for a short time. But a year later, it would another update would cuck me. So I, annoyingly would only turn on the Ethernet or the internet when using samples, and that became certain jobs require more samples than others, and that became more and more of a thing. So I turn on the internet, get updates, break something, fucking time suck again. And I'm sure some of you are like, well, you're just an idiot who doesn't know how to use Windows, and maybe you're right, maybe not, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty proficient with Windows. I was pretty knowledgeable about how everything works and how to keep things, create backup files, everything, so you can just reload and something. And sometimes that wouldn't work. Sometimes it would just completely reroute my signal chain, and it would just cuck me, and it was really annoying. So I started looking at things about Linux. I know Linux, you can just kind of not choose to update anything. You can specifically choose to update and what you don't want to update. And I thought that was really cool. So I decided to, look into that. I tried, what was I going to say here? Tried Ableton using wine through bottles, and that worked well enough for a day. When I got all set up and I tested it, I was like, oh, my plugins work. Everything's, seemingly A-okay here. There's a plugin or two that didn't work, but I was like, okay, maybe I could find a workaround for it. And I made a song or two that way, and then there's one point where I added 3 VSTs to a track, and for whatever reason just kept crashing it over and over again. Maybe a soft crash. It would lock up for 3 minutes at a time, which essentially is a crash. Well, I guess not technical terms, but it would lock up for 3 minutes, and then it would play for 30 seconds and then lock up again. I was like, okay, this is unusable. I can't really make music like this. Even if it did lock up for 3 minutes and I had to wait 3 minutes and it worked fine, that's still unacceptable. So I started looking into Bitwig. I know Bitwig's some of the creators from Ableton made Bitwig, and it looks similar enough. It feels similar enough that transferring over into Bitwig really wasn't that hard. I was able to make this goofy little lo-fi piece of shit song. And not even a song, just a riff. And I chopped it up, did all that stuff, that you do when you make music. Added some effects, figured out how to use return tracks and stuff. Got my signal chain working really well. And, I was like, okay, this is working. This is kind of cool. But my VSTs weren't working. So I was like, not all of my VSTs were working. So I was like, well, now I have an issue because it doesn't support DLL files natively. So that's when I tried your bridge. And that was okay, but not all of my plugins worked. I don't think I did anything wrong. I just think that some plugins are borked. And using your bridge also is working through Wine. And for those who don't know, Wine is a translation layer where it reads Windows files and translates them into something that Linux can read, because they're two different operating systems and they read different types of files. So you have to have a translation layer to be able to read those things. And there's a Wine version for macOS too, to do Windows files on macOS. So it translates it into something that, the Macintosh OS can read. Where was I going? But yeah, so my VSTs weren't working, not all of them. And so I was like, okay, they're not translating perfectly. Not all of them work all the way. And it was pinging the CPU a little bit higher than I would like it to. Because sometimes I do have 20, 30 tracks sometimes. Sometimes it's not often, but it's often enough to where I was like, this could be a problem later on, and I don't want to have to deal with that. So from there, I tried something called Audio Gritter, which I found out through like a YouTuber. His name's, let me check it out. I remembered it from like a year ago. I have a picture of his channel in the picture here, and maybe I won't link to it because I'll forget to link. I always forget to link stuff. I'll try to remember, but I'll definitely show the on screen for you guys so you guys can know who he is. And he was talking about Audio Gritter, which creates, you can use like an old MacBook, an old what are those called? An old even just old Mac. Like if you have an old Macintosh, like the old ones lying around. If you have an old PC, or you have an old not the Mac Studios, I forget they're called, the small little ones. Anyway, those little tiny Macs. I'll post a picture of those too. I forget what they're called. If you have any of those lying around, then you can use that to hold all your VSTs, and anything that works natively with that will work essentially with Audio Gritter. And how that works is, I'll show you here. I can't really show you my server PC that's hosting everything, but this is the host PC. This is the main PC I use. So I just already have this brought in here. It works relatively in real time, and for some reason I had to go to buffer size, and I had to disable the buffer size for some reason, and the block size just kind of defaults to whatever the host is doing, which is what this is doing, which isn't even 1024. It's actually 256. And from what I could tell, the latency wise sounds like 256. I don't know if it's a bug or something, but other than that, everything works fine. And I named the Audio Gritter on the server side renderer, so that's why it says renderer here. And we have 0 millisecond response time, and I can play it allegedly. I think there is like a slight delay, but so this is for the shaker track. Let me just, that's me, my mic or my shaker hitting the no real latency. It reduces the CPU usage on this computer, so I can have more tracks and not really ever have to worry about, is it gonna ping my CPU? I just to make sure that the server CPU is fine, which in most cases we're using, like especially effect VSTs, maybe not so much, something like labs. If you have a bunch of lab sounds going on, maybe then it'll ping it higher, but even then it's only doing this one thing, and it works fine. And the way I got around it by not updating was by disabling the internet. I even got Splice working on Linux, which was a little bit easy and a little bit hard. I basically made the files visible on the network, and I copied those files over into a Linux host, into a Linux wine under bottles. And and I got Splice working. The only thing that kind of stinks about it is that you can't drag and drop, and I think that might be an issue with Bitwig, not just Splice itself running through wine. I think it's actually an issue with Bitwig, not Splice. But what does work is if you copy it and you go to, or let's just here's downloaded. You just copy to clipboard, then you can right click, and you can right click paste or into a different track, or you can Control V, and that works 100% of the time. Dragging over will sometimes work through desktop, but who wants to do that? I don't want to go drag a file from my, my my hard disk that has a bunch of samples on it onto the desktop, and then put them into here, and then delete it, and then collect all and save. It's a pain in the ass. Who wants to do that? So you just copy paste, and it works like as intended. And that was like the only thing last thing I needed to work efficiently. That was all I need. I don't need a lot of stuff for the work that I do, so that worked for me. So I hope this video is kind of helpful for somebody who might be considering leaving Windows, because their current beta has ads in it, and I'm like, come on, dude. Like, I don't want to launch up my shit and leave the internet off all the time. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. I was able to keep the internet off on the server that has all the VSTs on it, all the plugins on it. I was able to keep the internet off on that, and just have it connect to the local network. So unless I want to download something new, that I need something new, which I don't, because I have enough hardware and plugins that work for me, that work the way I know how to use them, and I can get exactly what I need to, like that. My main thing now is learning all the local plugins within here, which are kind of crazy. Oh, that's one thing I want to mention too, is that this doesn't really use Max for Live. Like Max for Live filled a lot of the patches, a lot of the holes that were inside of Ableton for using a lot of, I don't know, certain plugins that might have been cool to have that weren't native. Somebody would make a Max for Live it, and they could sell it, or they could make it for free, or you can somehow, if you were good enough at like programming within Max for Live. You can make it yourself, and theoretically copy it that way if you're able to reverse engineer something in a way that acted similarly to the way somebody else made. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but yeah. And then this one doesn't have that, but this one allows scripts. And through these scripts, I wanted to say that I was able to get like my push to work on here. So I have a push 2 that works on here, and like that was crazy to me. I knew my key station would work. I use a full weighted was it like, yeah, I think it's a full weighted MIDI keyboard here by M Audio, and I knew that would work. Like that, it's it's fine. It's like a MIDI board. Even if you can't get it to work, you can just run it through as a main little MIDI board, like a default kind of unnamed MIDI board, and it'll work. But it works under here and it picks up, and that was great. That was a great experience. Yeah, everything just kind of just works with that script. You can Google the name of the script. I forget it. Maybe if I remember, I'll put it inside the video here too, and I'll show it on screen. But that works great, and I can use my push almost all the same features that I would normally have on Ableton. Granted, it's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but for me, it works well enough. And again, you have like 95% of the features. So for most people, I think that for their workflow, it would work. And yeah, I'm kind of excited because I don't have to worry about updates breaking everything. That's the main thing I prefer about Linux. Not necessarily Bitwig. The difference between Ableton and Bitwig is, to me, it doesn't really matter. They're both tools. And once you know how to use the tool, you're kind of golden. You don't really need to figure anything else out. The same thing with like, there's all this like shit talking about different DAWs. And it's just because people are, I don't understand it. Like Fruity Loops is fine. It's great. It works better in Wine on Linux than I almost considered going to Fruity Loops too. But I decided just a Bitwig looks similar and feels similar enough. So I was like, I can probably learn that a little bit quicker. And I did. I was able to make this like in 10 minutes. And it would normally take me like 5 minutes to make something like this. It's very basic, very simple, just chopping, setting up a basic, layout of something that I'm used to. But yeah, I don't know. It's everything's been working phenomenally here. And that's been like my main issue was with Windows. It's not really necessarily Ableton thing. Ableton's great, and if they made a native port for that for Linux, I would 100% use it. And because I have like 10 years plus of hotkey memorization in my brain, and I'm a little bit slower now, but honestly, like I'm gonna make that time up when I don't have to go back and redo a bunch of other stuff that's goofy. In the means of like, resetting things up or reinstalling Windows again and getting everything working again. It's kind of a pain in the ass. So I am pretty happy with this. Like this is, pretty great. Yeah, I think that's the only thing I really wanted to say about this video is like what I did, how I did it, in a very, non-in-depth way. But yeah, if you guys are considering, leaving Windows and scared about switching over to a new DAW, don't be scared about it. Just do it. Whatever doesn't work either, you'll find a pretty good tool that does work very similarly enough on Linux anyway. Like Audio Gooder works great for me, and it does suck that I have to have still like a $120 mini computer that doesn't really drain a whole lot of power. But I mean, that's a small price to pay for having everything work all the time. But yeah, it's basically my TED Talk, and you guys can leave a comment. I'm not really checking them. Like a lot of them are kind of goofy. Some people like don't even watch the whole video. I'm noticing like especially on the Tekken video that I made, y'all be goofy, just like typing out like I don't know, it's like and like asking questions that were already answered. I'm like, y'all are fucking annoying. So anyway, I hope you guys liked the video though, and I appreciate anybody who watched to the end. Yeah, that's it. What'd you guys have for dinner? I'll read those comments. Otherwise, have a nice day.